Here with me this morning are HuffPost UK's political editor Kevin Schofield and political commentator Benedict Spence. Everyone, nice to see you both. So, as you might imagine, an awful lot on the papers looking ahead to the Labour Party conference, which gets underway today in Liverpool. A couple of papers have got interviews with Keir Starmer. One of them, Kevin, is the Sunday Mirror.
Yeah, the Mirror have got to sit down with the PM, sort of traditional eve of conference interview, and I think it gives a flavour of what to expect from the conference, basically. Very heavily attacking Nigel Farage. I think we're going to see a lot of that over the next few days, particularly in Keir Starmer's keynote speech on Tuesday. They're looking at the same opinion polls as the rest of us. They can see ahead, and there's another poll in one of the papers this morning showing that Reform, if an election was held tomorrow, would undoubtedly win. So Keir Starmer is really going for the man here in terms of Nigel Farage, attacking his character. He's grubby. Now, that relates to going to America, he says, and trying to make as much money as he can instead of spending time in his Clacton constituency. And he says, you know, he doesn't care about ordinary people. He only cares about himself. He says that's grubby. If you want someone who, you know, represents ordinary people, vote Labour. It's effectively what we're going to be told over the next few days, and also, but I think before the next general election.
What do you make of that approach, Benedict? Do you think it kind of bigs up Nigel Farage, and Nigel Farage will like hearing that Keir Starmer sees him as the big enemy, if you like, politically, or do you think that this has to be done because he's being realistic when he looks at the polls?
I'm sure Nigel Farage is delighted that the Prime Minister is talking about Nigel Farage when he should be talking about other things, frankly. I think the problem is with all of this, it stems from the fact that there is a lot of grubbiness that's been going on within Labour, or at least that's the perception of it. And it sort of started straight off the bat with the Lord Alley thing, and then obviously losing your Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister due to a housing issue, and then any number of other ministers, largely down to scandals to do with their own departments. It's not great. So trying to sort of flip that and say, well, everybody else is just as bad, including the darling of the sort of the insurgent right. The problem with that is this is not an unknown thing. Nigel Farage, his closeness with Donald Trump, his tendency to be off around the world doing his own thing. I think that's sort of priced in. And I think actually part of the problem is with the polling. If you thought shy Tories and shy Trump voters were a thing, you can absolutely believe that there are a lot of shy Reform voters as well. And I think, whilst I think it's understandable that stuff like this, actually the reason why he is so unpopular is the perception that his government is not doing well on fundamentals and is not actually putting out good enough policy. He needs to focus on that predominantly, rather than talking about the guy who's stealing his lunch.
Well, yes, and Keir Starmer might say, we've actually have put out policy. I mean, he'll cite, presumably, the announcement on Friday of the digital IDs that they're going to roll out. But what do you make of his approach? Do you think attacking Farage is something that has to be done? Or what do you make of that priority?
I think it probably does have to be done when you look at the opinion polling, basically. I mean, right now, we're going to come to it in a second, Keir Starmer's personal popularity is through the floor. And he has to somehow turn that around by convincing people, well, hang on a minute, if you're not convinced by me, if you're not convinced by Labour and how we've done thus far, just look at this other guy, you know. You've got to give him a proper scrutiny. I think there's a concern that thus far, the idea of Nigel Farage becoming Prime Minister is quite an abstract concept. A lot of people think, you know, it won't happen in the end, but they said that about Brexit, you know, it won't happen. And now I think what Keir Starmer's trying to convince voters is, look, this very much could happen, so you've got to really look at this guy's record and what he actually does rather than what he says. I mean, he's a very good communicator, Nigel Farage, there's absolutely no doubt about it. But Keir Starmer wants people to actually focus on his record and what he's actually done.
And we've talked a lot about the polling, so let's take a look at one of the articles that focuses on this, Benedict. This is inside the Telegraph, isn't it? And the headline is one that Keir Starmer, as he strides there in Liverpool ahead of the conference, is not going to want to read. Starmer, least popular Prime Minister of all time.
Well, initially, I was slightly alarmed by that because I thought Chamberlain lost Czechoslovakia and Eden lost the Suez Canal. I thought this really is bad, but it only goes back to 1977, so some breathing room there. But nonetheless,
of all time,
yeah, I thought that's a
50 years.
Slightly misleading headline, but still, it's obviously not very good. It's not entirely his fault, I think, and he would be entitled to feel a little bit miffed about this because he has inherited so many of the problems that are currently sort of hamstringing him. Obviously, people would then turn around and say, well, that's the nature of the job. You understood that when you took it on. That's fair enough. the major issue, I think, is having promised a degree of maturity in an approach to government. Actually, it simply comes across as sluggishness. Now, we've also got, as you mentioned, policies that are being announced, ID cards being one, new homes being built, which we'll get to in a second, is another. But the problem is we're almost, almost 18 months now into his government, and we're only just now getting to the point where new policies are being rolled out, and we're talking about it as a second phase. That doesn't give the impression of stability or maturity. It looks like somebody who's dropped the ball, because they have clearly dropped the ball. Actually, they were expecting it to be much smoother, not realising, I think, a lot of the voters, their patience ran out with the last Tory government, not just for the Tories, but I think for established politics in general.
Well, yes, and take us to the Sunday Times, Kevin, another interview that he's done there as well. I think we can pull this round, says Starmer, sort of acknowledging some of the problems, clearly, not least problems from his own side when you've got Andy Burnham snapping at his ankles, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great look, is it, when you're, as Benedict says, just 18 months in, not even 18 months yet, and he's already talking about, I can pull this around. I mean, he won a landslide last year. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. And you're right, I mean, that's going to be the other thing to look out for. It's going to be unavoidable at the Labour Party conferences. Andy Burnham is going to be literally everywhere. He's going to be speaking at every fringe going. He's sit-down interviews. He's already done New Statesman, The Telegraph. He's going to be everywhere.
What do you make of that? I think it's inside the Times. I've read one comment piece that is questioning whether or not he's gone too early. If he does want the leadership, which he would no doubt say that that's not what he's all about, you know, this is quite early in the term to sort of show your hand, even if
there is a danger that he's certainly gone too early, because I think speaking to a lot of Labour MPs, it's annoyed them as much as anything. You know, they point to the fact that when Andy Burnham was on Jeremy Corbyn's front bench, he didn't resign, along with lots of other front benchers who did, specifically because he said we should support the leader. We should be loyal to the elected leader of the Labour Party. And they're saying, well, hang on a minute, he's not really been loyal to Keir Starmer. We can't shut the guy up right now. I mean, he's criticising Keir Starmer an awful lot. And you know, it's been well rehearsed, the obstacles he's got to overcome rather. You know, he's got to become an MP, first of all, and that's not guaranteed. Then when he gets in, he's got to somehow find 80 MPs, Labour MPs, to support him to challenge Keir Starmer. He might not be going the best way about that right now, but yeah, there's no doubt he's decided this is the time to go. Starmer is very unpopular, he's under pressure, and something's got to change.
Let's take a look at, you mentioned in passing one of the announcements that's going to be made, and this is about building new towns, Benedict, and it's The Observer that's picking this up.
Yeah,
well, a lot of the papers are, but this
up to 300,000 new homes, several new sites across the country, including in Yorkshire, including in London as well. And this was something that I think it's almost sort of fallen by the wayside, the housing issues in this country, because everything else has sort of taken control of the narrative. But it is still a problem that there simply isn't enough housing in this country. But it's not just housing, it's also infrastructure that comes with that as well. It's schools, it's roads, it's reservoirs. And I think whilst it was something that sort of dogged the Tories, Labour obviously planned to get ahead of it, get a handle on it, and they've not been able to do that either. The planning system in this country, well documented, is very difficult to sort of traverse. Whether or not Labour can get houses being built at the rate that they need to be before the next general election remains to be seen. But this is the sort of thing that they should have been going with from the off, actually, is that sort of big, ambitious infrastructure sort of planning that people can tangibly look at and go, that's a nice break from the previous administration. Again, here we are well over a year into it, and he's now doing it as part of his let's try to forget about everything that went before kind of thing. And it just doesn't look like a confident government.
This was, of course, Angela Rayner's brief, and she would say she was pushing very hard to get houses built and strip away some of the blocks in planning that has been slowing it up. Keir Starmer really keen on this, isn't he? And he seems to think this will appeal to young people, this idea of regeneration, but also just physically giving people potentially access to their own home.
Yeah, I mean, young people have got a terrible time right now, and the opinion polling suggests that they are turning to Nigel Farage, or at least willing to give him a hearing. And Labour, who traditionally could rely on younger voters, we also know that come the next election, 16-year-olds are going to be able to vote. So if they can point to things like, well, look, we're giving you an opportunity to get on the property ladder, then that might help. But yeah, this is all about Labour trying to prove that they're doing stuff come back, Nigel Farage, he can talk about stuff, but we're in power, we can actually do stuff, but it needs to work. And they've got about 3.5 years to prove that it's working.
Yeah, so very briefly, Benedict, it'll be interesting what kind of atmosphere there is at the conference. What do you anticipate?
Well, we've not even touched on the issue of Gaza yet, which is going to be, I think, hugely problematic for him. It almost doesn't matter what he decides to do. People will criticise him, having slightly stumbled on it. It's going to be very tough for him. But this is what you get into politics for, the rough and tumble. He's Prime Minister, he knows that.
Indeed. We're out of time. See you next hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.